You are listening to Talking Star Wars. Hello and welcome.
I'm Alex,
And I'm Connor.
and today we're going to talk about Star Wars.
Yes, we're going to take a look at our topic of force powers, exploring force powers.
Yep, so in our ongoing series about exploring different force powers, we have decided to focus on another one today. If you would like to check out our previous episodes, we've explored such topics as the Force Dyad, Force Healing, and Force Lightning. Today, we are going to look at precognition, or the ability of Force users to see into the future, either through visions of possible futures or through their ability to see slightly into the future to anticipate the actions of their opponents.
So, when we take a look back through the history of Star Wars, I think that this is first introduced in Empire Strikes Back with Yoda's teachings and Luke being able to get glimpses of the future. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so we are able to tell right away in A New Hope that Obi-Wan Kenobi is able to sense the destruction of Alderaan.
Mm-hmm.
However, he is able to sense it at the moment it happens.
I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. I fear something terrible is happening.
So that is the first instance where we see a Jedi has sort of extrasensory perception, able to sense things from far away, even faster than the speed of light. Similar in the same way where Yoda in Revenge of the Sith is able to sense Order 66 taking place and the deaths of all of his pupils and Jedi across the galaxy, and physically affected by those visions.
And that can be seen as a Jedi's sensitivity to the living force, where in the ending of A New Hope, Luke is able to destroy the Death Star without his targeting device. And he's able to do that through his sensitivity. It's different than sensing something across the galaxy, I know, but it's just that attunement to the galaxy and every living being that a Jedi has.
So we see that general sensitivity to the Force and events transpiring elsewhere in the galaxy across almost an infinite distance, demonstrated in many different ways. That is one of the more general powers that pretty much every Jedi has.
Mm-hmm.
But not every Jedi or Force user shows the ability for true precognition.
Mm-hmm.
Most Jedi have the ability, and most Force sensitives in general have probably precognition out to a few seconds to maybe a minute or so.
Oh yeah, that's how they're able to dodge laser blasts so deftly. They're able to kind of perceive where those will be almost as a reflex. Spider-Man rules.
Yeah, as is explained in many expanded universe materials, the way in which Jedi and Sith and other Force users are able to, dodge blaster bolts or interpose their lightsabers to blaster bolts or even duel each other without the duel being over in just a couple of strikes is the ability to see a few seconds into the future. So they are not moving with super speed to see when the blaster bolt is fired to then deflect it. They are moving their lightsaber in the way beforehand to where they have foreseen the blaster bolt will end up.
There's a Nicolas Cage movie with this plot. It's not gone in 60 seconds. Or Drive Angry.
I believe it is Next.
That sounds right.
And it is terrible.
So
Nick Cage, no shade on you. You did your best with that movie. Watch the clips of the best 10 moments from that movie on YouTube and skip the actual narrative.
Yeah, so in our hierarchy of Nicolas Cage movies that we will touch upon every so often, that goes towards the bottom of the list. But anyhow, when speaking about the true precognition, being able to get these glimpses of the future, I know that Luke is able to demonstrate this, and that's what drives him to go to Cloud City in order to save his friends, face Darth Vader, and learn that he is Darth Vader's child.
Yeah, I would say that the Skywalkers in general show a predisposition to having precognitive Force visions, more so than just the few seconds in the future that other cultures have. I want to linger on the few seconds in the future. We edit that later.
Sure.
We also see this being able to see a few seconds in the future present in other non-Jedi Force cultures, such as the Chiss navigators called Skywalkers that we see in the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. We see that the Force-sensitive children are able to sense, doors a few seconds before they open, and events a few seconds before they happen. So it seems to be portraying that this ability, and we even see this in Tales of the Jedi with Ahsoka when she never reacts badly to the saber-toothed animal that has kidnapped her. She never feels like she's in true danger because she can see into the future and know that she's going to be fine. So this seems to be one of the base powers that most force-sensitive individuals contract and possess.
And you, tying it back to Anakin Skywalker, you told me before, off of mic, that Thrawn is able to recognize that Anakin Skywalker has Force abilities because he demonstrates a chiss trait to determine who's going to come through a doorway before it's even open, correct?
Yes, so this is one of the universally recognized powers of someone who is sensitive into the Force, or the Beyond, or the Tides, or whatever word a culture has for the Force. Yeah, and it doesn't even require using the Force as other people would. It is simply a sort of a passive ability. So even many untrained Force users that might not have a tradition of formal Force training with the Jedi or the Sith use this foresight ability a few seconds into the future to survive and apparently excel at what they do. So the Skywalker family, I would say, exhibits the strong precognitive ability to receive these greater Force visions, not just of the immediate future, but potential futures in a grander and broader sense.
Yeah, especially in Anakin's arc. It's what drives his motivations in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, because he foresees his mother dying in Attack of the Clones and then Padme dying in much the same way. So we have this introduction into Anakin's precognitive abilities, and in pursuing these visions, he finds that his mother did in fact perish at the hands of the Tusken Raiders. Moving on to Revenge of the Sith, he is acting very defensively because he knows that his visions are absolutely truth, in his eyes at least. So they're much more of or as much of a driving force in the prequels as they are in Empire Strikes Back for Luke.
Yeah, it seems that, I believe the implication is that Palpatine is also, to some degree, manipulating these visions to help Anakin Skywalker fall to the dark side, because we don't see Darth Vader himself receiving similar future precognitive visions once he has become a Dark Lord of the Sith.
I was going to ask that. Does he ever say, I'm trying to remember in Return of the Jedi, when he and Luke are talking on Endor, does Darth Vader ever mention, I've foreseen that we will rule the galaxy as father and son? Or does he just say that could be a possibility?
He says that could be a possibility. Is the Emperor's line, who is, I have foreseen it.
Yeah.
So this is not strictly a light side power. Sidious shows great ability and is probably the most skilled precognitive individual we see, besides perhaps Sifo-Dyas, who we'll discuss soon. But it is always made clear that you are able to see possible futures. It is not necessarily set in stone. Even when there are prophecies foretold, the way in which they can be interpreted and foreseen, are these fixed points in time, or are they simply likely possibilities? Is never truly explained, but our understanding of the Star Wars universe and free will, it would indicate towards the latter.
Yeah, because it's as Yoda says in Empire Strikes Back. It's just my favorite reference to the precognitive abilities. But Yoda says that this is a trap, Luke. You can't go face Vader now. You're not ready. And it's something that Luke defies in order to attempt to save his friends, and he's not fully able to do so, losing Han and losing a hand. That's got to be a pun somewhere in wiser minds connecting that. But he loses that in a consequence of pursuing this vision.
Yeah, so after Anakin's visions, and he either loses or suppresses the ability, or has the ability suppressed by Palpatine after becoming Darth Vader. Luke then shows the same precognitive ability after being trained in the Force by Yoda. We do not see him exhibit any precognitive ability beyond the normal Force sensitivity in A New Hope. But once he's received formal training from Yoda, he has this strong vision of Han and Leia dying.
Mhm.
And it could be he's just sensing their pain from far away, where Vader is torturing them.
Mhm.
But straight up tells Yoda, they will die if I don't go.
Mhm.
Is very convinced of that, and Yoda does not argue
Mhm.
because that is a extremely likely possible future that they have seen.
Mhm.
And Luke continues to be plagued by these precognitive visions throughout his life. We even see him having the same vision about his future pupil, Ben Solo, who becomes Kylo Ren.
Mhm.
He receives such a strong vision, almost Minority Report style,
Mhm.
that Kylo Ren will fall to the dark side and bring ruin to the galaxy, that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and his very act to snuff out his nephew's evil ends up inciting it.
I would like to pose the possibility that this could also be a further Palpatine manipulation. Palpatine manipulating Luke's mind so that he can feed into his emotions and his fear of what his nephew may do. And then I'm wondering, does Luke exhibit any precognitive abilities, any foresight in Return of the Jedi? He senses that Vader is on a looming ship, or that he's on the planet, and he must go to him. But I don't think he sees anything other than just knowing that his father is good. It could be a foresight into the fact that his father's going to save him, but that's never said on film.
No, he says, I can still see the good in you to Darth Vader, aka Anakin Skywalker, but we do not yet see Luke in Return of the Jedi exhibit, a vision of the future. He's able to sense Leia. He's a much more powerful Jedi at this point. He's able to sense Leia's emotions, sense that they are related, engage in repartee with Anakin Skywalker about their mutual connection and force sensitivity.
Mhm.
But he does not receive this almost formal vision that he did in Empire Strikes Back under Yoda's tutelage.
And this is just a side argument, but one more piece of evidence is that as soon as Palpatine enters the scene in the original trilogy, that is directly prior to Luke gaining a vision of his friends dying. So, just a minute possibility that it could be Palpatine's ability to infect people's minds.
And maybe even tease out the Skywalker family's inherent precognitive ability to
Mm-hmm.
his own dark side ends. Because you're right, Luke does not receive this vision about his friends. And in fact, Han and Leia are not tortured until Darth Vader has disclosed. Well, Darth Vader had already learned that Luke Skywalker was his son, but hides it from the Emperor. As seen in the Darth Vader comic run starting in 2015, had hired Boba Fett to find out the identity of Luke, who blew up the Death Star, and then hid his identity from the Emperor. The Emperor independently learns that the person who blew up the Death Star was Luke Skywalker.
Oh yeah, he's the Emperor. That information would be public to him through physical, spiritual means. He would definitely be able to suss that out.
Yeah. But if we are going to view Palpatine as one of his primary force powers, manipulating force visions, we see this also in the Rise of Kylo Ren, the comic series that shows more context around Kylo leaving the Jedi Order after his confrontation with Luke. And we see that he has been in mental contact with Snoke since he was a child.
Yes.
And that Snoke has been masquerading as his friend for a long period of time. And as is revealed during the cloning experiments in The Rise of Skywalker, Snoke was always Palpatine's puppet.
And Palpatine has been every voice that Kylo Ren has heard, including Snoke and Darth Vader's, which I have always found quite interesting, because we know in The Force Awakens that Vader has been speaking to Kylo, but many people would bring up the fact that Anakin Skywalker, either the old man or the Hayden Christensen version, showed up as a ghost, a Force ghost, at the end of Return of the Jedi. So Anakin's spirit lives on. So either they're going to bring in a strange dark side force phantom which we've never seen and would break lore, or it's a manipulation of some kind which it ended up being.
Yeah, and Palpatine lies all the time. He is not a reliable source of information about anything, let alone himself. He is always pursuing an end, even when he's a crazed, half insane dark side force clone, as is the antagonist in Rise of Skywalker. But they're also in The Last Jedi, we see Luke reference Leia's ability for precognitive visions
Mm-hmm.
when she says if she foresaw that if she continued her Jedi training, her son would eventually fall to the dark side. Now, her son fell to the dark side anyway, but it was the reason that she decided to forego her Jedi training was due to a vision she received when on the cusp of becoming a Jedi Knight.
Was it that he would fall to the dark side, or that he would die? I thought there was a death somewhere in the premonition.
Yeah, I think it might have been that he would die, and that would likely be because maybe Leia would be forced to confront him,
Mm-hmm.
or he would try to confront her, and she would be forced to kill him.
Sure.
So, but Leia did receive this precognitive vision, as we know that the Skywalker family is prone to, and it did, it made her make significant life decisions to instead return to politics, leave her Jedi training aside, and commit herself to being a senator.
Which, in a narrative sense, that's what you have to do with the twins. You can't have them both become, twin Jedi Masters.
Well, you could.
You could, but for Leia's agency, I forgive the fact that she returned to politics and became a rebellious leader.
Yeah. Leia as a military and political leader is a more engaging niche for her, I agree. But the fact that she retains these strong force powers as her birthright is also interesting. And we only see her use her force powers a couple of times. She's able to sense Luke's death. She's able to sense her son's recommitment to the dark side. She's able to sense Rey's force sensitivity, and she is able to survive being blasted into space by having the force sustain her.
And Leia will be a topic for another day, but the fact, again, shows that she has the ability of foresight and that it could be manipulated by Snoke. She says in The Force Awakens that Snoke is manipulating Kylo Ren, her son.
I would say that Rey also shows the ability for precognitive visions, for potential futures.
She saw a dark vision of herself as potential Empress Palpatine. The shark-toothed doppelganger of herself.
In Rise of Skywalker, when she is in the ruins of the second Death Star, yes. I would say this is similar to the vision that Luke received in the Dark Side font upon Dagobah. So is this precognition, or is this the impact of a Dark Side location, as discussed in Episode 14, Dark Side Locations? It is unclear, and she doesn't show any other future visions that we are aware of. She sees visions of her past when she again goes to the Dark Side font location, present on
Ahch-To,
where Luke had exiled himself in The Last Jedi.
And she touches Luke's lightsaber and experiences the past of the lightsaber, but that is a more so an effect of possible psychometry, which is episode 2 of our podcast, Talking Star Wars. You're listening to it right now.
Yeah, so I don't think we can definitively say whether Rey has precognitive force abilities. Palpatine, if we're going to go start maybe with our more powerful force users, the two most powerful force users we've met in the films are Yoda and Palpatine. And both of them show strong precognitive abilities. In fact, Palpatine uses his to foil Yoda's abilities to pull off his plans.
Yeah, Yoda's mind is essentially clouded for much of the series by Palpatine's machinations. I don't know if that is as true in the original trilogy, but Yoda says it multiple times throughout the prequel trilogy that clouded
by the dark side the future is. Which at the time, I believe he meant that was the Clone War itself, and all this war and death was causing a surge in the dark side and hiding his vision. Though they did know there were Sith at work after having fought and Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan killing Darth Maul. Well, mostly killing Darth Maul.
Which, another sidebar, we need a prequel series to the prequel trilogy showing what Palpatine is doing to cloud the Jedi's minds. I know there's some sort of dark side temple underneath the Jedi temple.
Yes,
right?
as revealed in the novel Lords of the Sith, Palpatine has restored and lurks in a dark side shrine that is present beneath the Jedi temple, and he uses that to cloud many of the visions that Yoda might have, using his strong precognitive ability to foil his evil plan to take over the Empire and become immortal, and all his dastardly interlocking opportunistic plans.
So yeah, imagine a political drama where Palpatine is like rising up through the ranks of uh, the Senate. Meanwhile, is lurking underneath the Jedi Temple, conducting dark side spells with his master. Palpatine would be played by Tom Hiddleston or someone like that. Everyone would go wild, but regardless, back to the foresight.
Yeah, so Yoda shows some ability for precognition, though it's more, I would say, he shows an ability for projecting his consciousness across large distances and being able to speak and sense what's going on in the present, more so than the future. His attempts to view the future are largely foiled in the prequel trilogy, and then by the original trilogy no longer really matter, as he has isolated himself from the galaxy.
Yeah, it's again he's sensing and again he's tapping into the living force, the now. That's there's another famous Yoda line that I'm going to butcher, that Luke is focusing too much on where he's going, not where he is. Or do you know what I'm referring to when they're on Dagobah?
Yeah, always with his eyes on the horizon, never focused on where he is, what he is doing.
There we go. So it's that present action as much as looking into the future or dwelling on the past.
So this takes us to our confirmation that dark side users, the Sith, can also practice precognition
Mm.
in vision sense. Probably the second most powerful user of precognition that we see is Darth Sidious, aka Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, aka the Emperor.
Yes, but he's usually wrong. It's like, I see you turning to the dark side. No.
Yeah. So Palpatine has a strong ability to see potential futures, and he can cloud other people's precognition. He can nudge people towards the futures that he wants. But he is also prideful, as is every Sith. And he believes that the futures he has foreseen are always true.
Yes, they're absolutes, and that he is capable of steering the timeline to his will.
When often he cannot. We see him fail several times in visions he's had about turning people to the dark side or achieving victory. He's often correct. He executed Order 66. He took control of the Republic and made it the Empire. So he's not exactly, batting under 100 here, but neither is he hitting a home run every time.
Right.
He is unable to get access to the nexus between worlds and rebels, which he had foreseen in another ritual. He does not successfully bring Luke over to the dark side. And if we're looking at his extension, Snoke, in the sequel trilogy, Snoke has an elaborate Force vision of Kylo Ren rising his lightsaber to strike him down, strike down his enemy. But rather than it being Rey, his enemy is Snoke. And Kylo uses Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber to kill Snoke unceremoniously right there. So I think this is showing where if a light side Force user or a Jedi's precognitive ability are often clouded and unclear, often Sith are much more certain in their precognitions, but are more often incorrect, unwilling to admit that the future that they want may be unlikely or out of reach.
Or that there are aspects that are uncertain. Snoke knows that Kylo Ren is going to strike down his enemy, but he's not. He's too prideful and believes that there's no way that I could be Kylo Ren's enemy. I am his master. I am his supreme leader, his friend.
Yeah. And I think this is going to touch on a larger topic, which is how precognition, being able to see the future, is inherently tied to manipulation of time. We see this much more directly addressed in Rebels, where there are characters who are able to directly access a physical nexus of the Force, which has a bunch of different points in time connected, able to see, witness, and interact with various points in time and space, because so the Force, they're all the same. Time as a river and a stream. Star Wars is definitely leaning into the concept of time as a fourth dimension that you can move through with certain, not mechanical but mystical means.
Yeah, we'll probably see that in Ahsoka. Hopefully.
Yeah, Ahsoka herself does not really exhibit any precognitive powers, but we have often seen in these certain dark side and Force locus locations that precognitive visions arise in individuals going there, even if they themselves do not show that ability outside of those locations. I am reminded of Darth Vader's dark side sanctum on Mustafar, and when he is constructing it and needing to get over the death of Padme and stop trying to resurrect her in 2017's Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith comic series. He receives a vision from the dark side of the Force where he sees potential futures, including a few lines by Kylo Ren, including his line, "Kill the past if you have to," where the dark side is trying to convince him to, get over the death of his wife and start being a Sith Lord. And that is rising out of this dark side location present on Mustafar.
Mm.
So I believe it's all interconnected. There are individuals strong in the Force who are more sensitive to the eddies of time and what could potential futures be. But for individuals who are not as inherently strong in that, they can still access that aspect of the Force through certain locations.
Mhm.
And perhaps even through certain rituals, as the Night Sisters of Dathomir will often attempt to divine either present or future abilities using their magic as well.
I just watched that arc the other day, and seeing how separate from either side of the Force their abilities are.
The Night Sisters of Dathomir.
Yeah, but at the same time, inherently tied to spirituality and the
And-
living will of the galaxy.
And most often the dark side of the Force, though not inherently.
Mhm.
It is a Force tradition, most often calling upon the dark side, but as seen in both Dark Disciple and the activities of Merrin in Fallen Order, not inherently part of the dark side.
Certainly not loyal to the Sith whatsoever. The Night Sisters follow no man.
Well, and no one other than their own traditions. And then Palpatine arranges them to be killed because of it, their entire culture. Sends Grievous to commit one genocide.
So moving on from genocide.
Well, this actually is a good segue because we come on to our most powerful precognitive Force user mentioned in any of the current canon media, and that would be Sifo-Dyas.
Mm-hmm.
His name will be most familiar as the Jedi that the Kaminoans had on file, as having ordered the clone army. We'd never see him on screen, but his shadow lies long.
Mhm.
We learn much of his backstory in the audio drama or book Dooku, Jedi Lost, where we get the backstory of Dooku. And Sifo-Dyas is his fellow apprentice, Padawan, eventual best friend. And Sifo-Dyas is increasingly plagued throughout his life with visions of catastrophe. And they're usually correct. There is a notable instance in Jedi Lost where they're on a farming planet that Sifo-Dyas has insisted they visit, and their orbital platforms start to collapse, and the whole planet is faced with widespread devastation, which Sifo-Dyas has foreseen. And these visions plague Sifo-Dyas for his entire life. It eventually even being shielded from the Jedi Council by his mentor, who journeys with him to find Jedi artifacts. Because if they knew how bad his visions had gotten, they would confine him for medical treatment and likely not let him leave the Jedi Temple. The visions are so debilitating and dangerous to him. This also makes Sifo-Dyas easily manipulatable by his best friend, Dooku, even after Dooku has left the Jedi. And this is how Sifo-Dyas is convinced, due to the terrible visions he received, the only way to avert them is to do what Dooku is saying. And so he is convinced to go and order the clones from the Kaminoans to avert the clone wars that he is foreseeing in his visions. And then his ship is attacked and he is killed, as we find his derelict ship in the Arc of the Clone Wars, where he did not survive.
And we have the consequences therein where now Palpatine has an army due to Dooku's manipulations of Sifo-Dyas' visions.
Yeah, so the manipulation of visions appears to be one of Palpatine's favorite tools, but he doesn't even need to really manipulate Sifo-Dyas' visions. They were debilitating enough on their own. And so it's the constant visions of continual catastrophe and death. Because even in a perfectly peaceful galaxy, natural disasters still exist. And in the galaxy of the Star Wars, it's not ever perfectly peaceful or orderly. And so there's always another catastrophe or massacre or mass death for Sifo-Dyas to foresee. And he almost drives himself mad trying to prevent or deal with as many of them as possible.
This reminds me of a pretty strong arc near the end of the Clone Wars. I think it was the end of the Clone Wars series, where Dooku was realizing that the Jedi are starting to catch on to Sifo-Dyas and really get down to who ordered these clones, how did this get set up. And it's this ticking clock episode or series of episodes where Dooku has to erase all evidence of his interactions with Sifo-Dyas. And it was a very nice way to tie the end of the Clone Wars back to Attack of the Clones, where you have this introduction of this mystery that really needs to be sidelined because the Jedi and the Republic can't question where the clones are coming from because they're necessary to fight this war against the Separatists and their droids.
Yeah, so yeah, and this all stems from Sifo-Dyas' precognition. And who knows to what degree that precognition and visions were real, impacted by Palpatine, manipulated, or was he just a very powerful Force user, and Palpatine used those abilities through his eventual apprentice Dooku towards his own ends?
And one side note, so I'm so glad they actually made Sifo-Dyas a character, because in the original script, Sifo-Dyas was a very clever nickname of Sidious, and it was not actually Sifo-Dyas, but it was Sifo-Dyas. And so Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas ordered the clones 10 years ago, and it was going to be revealed at some point that it was just Palpatine all along.
Oh yes, because they totally didn't know the name of Darth Sidious ever.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I also enjoy the character of Sifo-Dyas, making him this crippled Jedi with incredibly powerful precognitive ability, who was Dooku's best friend before he left the Jedi, and then remained manipulatable and a doomed character from the start.
So did Sifo-Dyas come up with the Chosen One vision, or did the Chosen One vision come long before that time?
So this is a perfect segue into the prophecies, which are contained in holocrons in the Jedi Temple and are largely discredited by the time we've reached the period of the Phantom Menace. We see at various points both Dooku and Qui-Gon Jinn are obsessed with the prophecies. It's implied this is a period that many Jedi go through, but Qui-Gon Jinn is eventually, Dooku tells him, you need to get over, because Qui-Gon Jinn is Dooku's apprentice, you need to get over your obsession with the prophecies. I went through the same thing. We need to focus on the present and the here and the now.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of that arc, Dooku himself, upset with the activities of the Jedi Order themselves, finds himself delving deeper into the prophecies and hiding it from Qui-Gon Jinn. So
you even see Maul obsessed with this in Star Wars Rebels, where he is obsessed with the idea of the new Chosen One being Luke Skywalker.
Yes, mostly as a means to find Obi-Wan Kenobi and kill him.
Mm-hmm.
So it is these prophecies, either accessed via holocron or written down, where powerful Force users have been trying for millennia to understand them. And so is this the ability of ancient powerful Force users to tap into a specific locus of the Force to see the future? Are they vague enough that they seem to apply? The implication eventually seems to be that they were seeing versions of very, very likely futures and writing them down, but the visions were always indistinct because it's too many variables to eventually get to that point.
Even the meaning of one bringing balance to the Force, as in the Chosen One, is vague, and largely true because Anakin was able to whittle down the number of Jedi to be 2 in matching the number of Sith that there were in the galaxy. So it's kind of a horrifying way to bring about balance in the Force. You could also answer that him removing Palpatine from the galaxy is removing this imbalance of evil.
Yeah, leaving only the Jedi behind.
Mm-hmm.
So that is probably the last aspect of precognition we wanted to call attention to, was these Jedi prophecies created by ancient Jedi sages, largely discredited, but still drawing in obsessed adherents in the time. And this explains much of the eccentric behavior of Qui-Gon Jinn, is he still believes in the veracity of these prophecies and has a more flexible notion of who and what Jedi are than the current Jedi Council in his day.
So yeah, we thank you for joining us on this discussion into
Force precognition.
The next time that we talk about Force power, we may delve into the idea of the Jedi mind trick, unless you send us a lovely idea via a comment or a post in our subreddit.
Yeah, so if you have any ideas for other Force powers you'd like us to look at that we haven't looked at yet, go to reddit.r/talking Star Wars or our YouTube channel or anywhere else you see our podcast.
We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.